Hi everyone, my name is Sofwan P. Today I'm here to discuss about Java applications. So I'm an enthusiastic Java developer having 2 years of experience in IT industry, and today I will be explaining how heavyweight applications like EJB and servlet applications transformed from those heavyweight to lightweight Spring and Spring Boot applications, and how Spring and Spring Boot helped the software developers in rapid application development. So if you watch this session completely, you will get a clear clarity on the evolving of Spring and Spring Boot from old technologies. So I will be starting with different types of applications. Hope my screen is visible. Here we can see we have two types of applications. One is standalone application and one is enterprise application. Standalone applications are like which is running on one machine, maybe used by one user. So those are like small applications which is we are using, like application like calculator, then small application like this Windows Microsoft Store, those kind of application which we can call as standalone application, which will be used by one user at a time. And in the next side we have a enterprise application. Enterprise applications are like Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, having large number of user base, and and also again these are classified into multiple types. So I am starting with standalone. Standalone applications are used by one user at a time, and again it is classified into two types of applications. One is CUI application and one is GUI application. CUI means character user interface applications, and GUI means graphical user interface application. So character user interface application is like when we are starting to learn code. First, maybe your first our program will be how to write a calculator code. So in that we will be giving output and input through the console. So those type of applications we can call as character user interface applications. And GUI applications are like calculator and notepad, this paint. So all those are GUI applications. Like we have a graphical user interface, we have different types of options in graphics. So those are GUI applications. And then comes enterprise application, which are again classified into two types of applications. One is web application and one is distributed application. So web applications are so compared to standalone application, web application, enterprise application have a specialty. So these application will not be used by one user at a time, and this will be accessible to the multiple users. So web applications are will be deployed on servers. So in standalone applications, application will be developed by software developers, and it will be made like a box and given to the users. So user can run those applications in their own system with by using their RAM and storage, everything. So enterprise application is not like that. It is an application which will be developed by developers, and it will be deployed in servers. So instead of deploying in a local machine, they are deploying it in a server. So if we do that, multiple users can use the same application, and we don't need tools like we don't need high GB like RAM, storage. Those are not required. We just need a browser interface. So by using browser we can access these applications which are deployed in server. So giving an example for web application is like it is deployed in server, but it will be used by one user. So example, maybe Facebook. So we are using Facebook, and multiple users are using Facebook. Using Facebook, we are checking the feeds, and we are checking all the posts daily. Or those applications are web applications which will not be interacting with other applications. So those are one kind of application, and other type is distributed application. Distributed application, suppose you are doing a bank transfer from Google Pay. So Google Pay will connect to the bank server. So that will be another application. So distributed applications are will be talking to another application instead of one application. Those two applications will be deployed on servers. So here I given a note, so we can see these standalone applications. These applications are designed without client and server architecture and without distributed application logic over multiple machines. So standalone application will be logic of the application, that means the code of the application will be on our desktop, so it will not be given for multiple users. So those are two types of application, one is CUI application and GUI application. And enterprise application are designed to execute any Java application on the basis of client server architecture and or distributing the application logic over multiple machines. Then that type of application are called distributed application. Client server architecture means if the application is deployed in server, that is server, and whoever using that application, like we will access the application Facebook from our browser, so our browser will be the client. So web applications. In web application, complete application logic is present only in one server, and in this type of application, client is the browser and both the client and server is connected through the protocols. So currently widely used protocol is HTTP. So we will be sending a request to the application from our browser, maybe to the Facebook we will send request from our browser, so it will reach the application and it will respond back the response and we can see the result. Like if we are requesting the field, if we type field, maybe if we click on field from the browser, we will get the result, the latest feeds from the Facebook. So that is the result we are getting from the server. So our browser is the client. So distributed application. In distributed applications are another type of application where application logic is this. Application logic means the application code is deployed in multiple servers. So suppose if you take the example of Flipkart, currently Big Billion sale is going on. So whenever you do a purchase, the application will be, the Flipkart application will be talking to your bank server. After doing purchasing, you need to do checkout, bill payment. So at that time, our application will be connecting to our bank server. So this application is not exactly connecting to one user or accessed by one user, but these applications are giving user interface for accessing application, and also these applications are talking to another business application, that is our bank application. So that type of application are distributed application. Distributed means application logic is distributed across multiple servers. So for this type of applications, client browser is not enough. So one application, business application, will be talking to another application. So then that client can be a normal Java program having main method or an applet or a frame, say GUI program, and maybe a servlet application or a JSP application or a Spring application or struct application. So in all those cases, JVM is required in the client side. So not only this browser is not enough for distributed applications, which is a type of enterprise application, and both client and server is connected through, as like our web application, these applications is also using HTTP. So that is one of the widely used protocol nowadays. So if we want to develop distributed application, we have to use a set of technologies. That technologies are called distributed technologies. So in the olden days, those applications are developed like first distributed application was developed by using RMI, then Cobra, then EJBs, which are like, all these are old, very old technologies. RMI was a program, maybe I think this RMI was developed by one application. So using, if you develop an application using RMI, if you develop an application using RMI, suppose Flipkart is developed using this RMI distributed application development technology. So at that time this Flipkart can only connect with, so suppose Flipkart is developed in Java, so if they used RMI, it can talk to only applications which are developed using Java. So that was tightly coupled on language. So if your application is coded in another language like Python, Ruby, Scala, any other application, that communication it not possible using RMI. And Cobra is like, that is also one more old technology which is not used nowadays. And EJB is also enterprise. EJB means enterprise Java Beans, which is an old Java technology. And EJB applications is also like, this can be talked, EJB applications can be communicated to some other type of applications, maybe developed in Python or some other programming languages. But the problem was with EJB was it was heavyweight. So to run EJB application we need a lot of resources like very high RAM, very high memory. So it was a heavyweight application. Then comes web services. So first the web services was developed using using SOAP, which was purely based on XML, and it has a lot of disadvantages. So gradually we moved to Rust. So nowadays we are developing REST based application in Java using Spring Boot. So Spring having a separate module named Spring Web for developing REST applications. So this REST application is not like RMI, EJB or Cobra. Sorry, it's not like RMI. It can be talked to any other application which is developed in other language. And also this was not heavyweight as like EJB. These are lightweight application. So now I am explaining what is primarily deals with. So now I am explaining what is a web server and what is an application server. So web server is primarily deals with saving static contents such as HTML files, image and CSS, no advanced multi-threading features. So web servers are application servers are used. So there are two types of servers, like as I told you before, after developing, applications will be deployed on servers. So there are two types of servers, one is web server and one is application server. So web server is primarily deals with static content. Static content means whenever you send a request to application, it will always give you the same request. So suppose if you open the list feed of Instagram feeds in your account, you will be getting multiple posts, which is multiple latest feeds based on your followings and your connections. But if I am opening that in my mobile, so I will be getting based on my followers. So all those are executed, or we are getting based on a logic. So those are not static, which are dynamic. So static pages are like, suppose if you see application like About Us. So if you see this application, just I am checking the About Us page of Infosys. So always this page will be same. So always we will be getting same page every time whenever you click About Us. But it is not like our Instagram feed. So those are like, whenever we are accessing that web page or the application, if you are getting always same result, like About Us page, maybe contacts, we will get the contact numbers always. So it will be changed maybe very rarely. So at that, those kind of things are responses are called static responses. And web servers are used for displaying static contents, which are HTML, CSS, no logic involved in server side. So now I am explaining what is the why we are choosing Java for developing applications. So Java is not the first programming language. Before Java we have spree programming and other type of programming languages, but why we are using Java even though we have other language technologies. So everyone knows, previously I told I will be explaining multi-threading, so here I am going to explain that. So as you can see, CGI technology. CGI is a technology, is an application development technology which is based on C programming. So this is the web application. If you are developing a web application using CGI technology, all that, for every client request a new process will be created at server side. So suppose this is your browser, mobile phone, some other person is using the same application. So if they used CGI technology for the development, whenever we send a request, at that time the application will be creating a process. Process is a heavyweight thing, so we can't execute a lot of process at the same time, because that was heavyweight and it will kill the application memory, and so application will be very slow and within some time it will be crashed. So all processes are heavyweight and it will cause delay in response. So if we are using CGI technology for application development, whenever from the client, whenever we are sending requests to the our web server, which is our web application is deployed in web server. So when we are sending requests from client to the web server, at that time a server side process will be created, P1, and again if another user is sending, again it will be creating another process. In the same way it will create n number of process. So it will be, so the application will be responding very delayed, so response will be delayed. So because of those type of issues, we have developers, Java peoples have developed another type of technology which is called servlets. So everyone knows Java has multiple type of Java edition. One is Java SE, that is sorry, 1 minute. Java SC, Java so in Java we have three types of editions. One is Java SE, which normally we will call Core Java. So Java SE is a standard Java edition, and in this we have a Core Java. Then we have JDBC, is another type of technology connecting to connect to database. And in Java we have, in Java Enterprise Edition we have servlets and other type of technologies like JSP and other technologies. So and micro editions is for mobile application development. So in Java standard edition we have a Core Java and JDBC. JDBC is for connecting to database, which is Java database connectivity, and Java Enterprise Edition consists of servlet and JSP. So in Java Enterprise Edition we have servlet, which is a type of technology for developing web applications. So if you develop a servlet application, web application, you can, as everyone know, Java is a multi-threaded language. So Java is heavily accepting multi-threading, like Java has the feature of multi-threading. So compared to CGI, which is creating new process every time whenever clients send a request, which is creating issue at the server side, maybe delayed response. So instead of creating a process, Java application will be creating a thread. So as like So thread is a lightweight and less memory, quick execution. So thread is a lightweight thing, so it doesn't consume lot of memory. So whenever clients send a request, at the server side we have one servlet. If you are developing an application using servlet, we the our web server will be creating a servlet object. So in servlet object, we this web application will be web server will be creating a thread. So it will be helpful in multiple so it will be helpful if multiple user want to access the same application at the same time. So if one person is sending one request, it will T1 will be created for the request 1, and for request 2 T2 will be created, and T3 another request. So suppose, so these three people can use at the same time by concept of multi-threading. So at the same time multiple user are getting response, and it is very lightweight. So then for every request a separate lightweight thread will be created, and since threads are lightweight, execution will be fast and improves performance of the application. So compared to CGI, Java has this advantage because C programming is not a thread-based programming language, and but Java is a thread-based programming language, and so we are getting this advantage when we are using Java, and our application will be highly responsive and very quick. So now I am just showing how an application will how the client server architecture looks like. So suppose we can see client is our browser, and which is connected to the client server architecture. So client is our browser, and suppose this is the Facebook application. This is one web server. So client is connecting to the server using protocol over internet. So one of the mostly used protocol is HTTP. So using HTTP protocol, our browser will be sending a request to the server. So inside server, server can be of two types. One can be application or web server. So in this case, if this is a web server, we will be deploying the application in the server. So whenever client send a request, this will be the diagram. So as you can see, in this case we have two web resources. Inside application we will be having multiple servlets if we are using servlet technology. So this is one resource, and this is second resource. Based on this, if client is sending request to the to the server will process the request, server will create a new thread, and based on by using the server side resources, it will be giving back the response to the client. So yeah, this is the flow how it works. So, and as I told you before, HTTP is the one of the widely used protocol nowadays for connecting client to server. So but this HTTP has a disadvantage, but that is not a disadvantage actually, that is also an advantage in multiple ways. So HTTP is a stateless protocol. So if you send a request to the server, at the same time, suppose stateless means let me tell you one example. You are accessing your Facebook application from the client from your browser, and it is Facebook server will be receiving your request. So when the server after receiving the request, so you will maybe you will do the login process. You will be giving your username and password. Based on that, our login homepage will be displayed. So since those who are using HTTP is a stateless nature. So next time after clicking on home, again if you are going to your profile option, maybe in another tab, you need to log in. So that is an issue with HTTP. So whenever you send another request, all the time HTTP will not be remembering your previous credentials. So again browser will be like, who is this? Again we need to verify, you need to log in again. So that is an issue with HTTP. So to avoid this, we need to do session tracking mechanism at the server side. So suppose if I am opening LinkedIn, inside LinkedIn we have multiple things. So if this LinkedIn is not implemented session tracking mechanism, if I am clicking on my network, automatically I need to log in again. So those type of things is already implemented in LinkedIn, so it is working. So session tracking mechanism is required since HTTP is a stateless protocol. So as I told you before, by using Java we are using servlet technology for developing applications. So the problem with the servlet is, suppose I will show you one program. Let's look into the example code of servlet development. So if you want to develop a servlet in Java, you need to implement servlet interface. So this contract is, maybe if you need to do some contract in Java, we will be using interfaces. So in the same way, Java developers, Java owners has given a contract of servlet. So whoever want to develop a Java application, they need to implement the servlet interface. So if you see said Java extort servlet interface, we have 5 methods. So if you see, this is the specification given by the Oracle team. So whoever want to develop a Java application, they want to implement the servlet interface. So this is one type of thing. If you implement this servlet interface, this has 5 methods. So your Java class will be able to handle HTTP requests, so and will be able to process it. So in this way we are developing servlet in Java applications. But the problem with this approach is, whoever wants to implement a servlet or develop a servlet, they need to implement the servlet interface. So this is tightly coupled. So in future, if you are if someone invented as other technology, so if they want to move this application from this technology to other technology, they need to rewrite complete code by replacing the interface. Maybe they need to implement different interface, different methods. Servlet has multiple methods: service method, init method, handle methods, so multiple methods. So all those they need to change. Suppose if they developed a big application and if they want to change it, it will be very tedious. So this is called invasive nature. Whoever at any time, this is tightly coupled with technology, so this approach is not recommended. Also, one more problem, we have to write a lot of boilerplate codes. So if you take the example of JDBC, if you want to connect to database, you have to do multiple steps. First you want to load the JDBC driver in your application. Again you need to establish the connection, you need to create statement object, you need to execute the query, then again you need to process the result and you need to get back. All those are very tedious when you are doing developing a big application. So Rod Johnson, who is the inventor of Spring, who saw all these problems, and they started to thinking about another framework which will be like, then they can get rid of all these problems. So that framework should be non-invasive. So it should not be like, there should not be a hard rule like they need to implement that interface or some other interface. So all those was their concerns, and also they they want to reduce the boilerplate code. If you want to connect to database, you need to write 7-step logic. So every time whenever you are writing, your code base will be huge and maintenance, everything will be difficult. So to avoid that, all those problems, Spring team has Rod Johnson has came up with Spring framework. A framework is not a new technology, rather it's an abstraction provided on top of technology. This third-party team would give APIs in the form of jars and would be generate boilerplate code based on the input given to the internal container of the framework. So frameworks, like if you are using Spring framework, you don't need to manually implement the servlet interface. So our framework will take care of all these things. We can do these things in a very simple manner, and you don't need to write 7-step logic to connect to database. You can easily use framework modules to easily connect to database, maybe within one step, maybe with one line of code you can replace 7 lines of code. So maintenance wise, everything will be very quick, maybe very good. So now we are I'm going to explain the frameworks, multiple frameworks. So we have two types of frameworks. One is application framework and one is web framework. So as like application server and web server. So one of the web application framework is Struct framework, maybe you already know. Then Spring MVC, yeah, it's one of the framework, and JSP, Java Server Faces, and WebWork by Symfony team. So all these are frameworks, and another framework is Hibernate, Toppling. So these are multiple web frameworks. So it will be like maybe useful for developing web application. So and next comes application framework. It's an all-rounder framework that provides abstraction on top of multiple JE technologies and even some frameworks to develop all kind of logic and different applications. So application framework means maybe application framework will use all these technologies and it will combine a new framework. So those framework will be very easy and very simple. We don't need to manually do all these tasks. So that is one thing. So if you are using application framework, our developers efforts will be very less and our life will be very easy. So Spring is one of the type of application framework. So that's why I am discussing about application framework. Spring has abstraction on top of multiple technologies. Let me show you an example. So if you see building application using technology, if you are developing a student application, you need to write one UI. Then if you see you are using ORM for connecting to database, which is an object relational mapping. You will be mapping your database table with Java classes, so you can easily query database from the Java application. So ORM framework will be internally using JDBC technology, of course. This is the primary technology for connecting to database. So on top of that, we are using Servlet. So if we are integrating Servlet with ORM framework, we need to take care a lot of things. If you know the code from the request object, maybe we will get the object. Public void service. So HTTP request, then HTTP response. So if you see this code, if you are developing a servlet application, in the service method you are getting request and response object. So you need to take the request parameters. Suppose you are submitting student ID, student name, student age, student address from the UI, maybe through HTML page, and manually you need to handle all this task of taking these parameters whatever user has given from the request object, and you need to process manually. So this is one type of boilerplate code if you are using technology. So like this we have to do multiple boilerplate codes. So to avoid all those things, we have to look into our application framework, which is Spring framework. So if you are using an application framework building, it has an abstraction on multiple technologies. If you see JDBC, Hibernate, and Spring MVC, so this Spring framework will take care of all these. We just need to include the dependency of the Spring. Maybe we need to use this framework, so all these things will be by default integrated. So we don't need to manually integrate and query each and everything, and it will reduce a lot of boilerplate things. So if you see Spring framework, which is one of the widely used framework and very hugely popular. So this framework has I'm just showing a diagram of Spring, overall view of Spring framework, and Spring framework has these many modules. If you see, Spring has a data integration module which having JDBC, ORM, Java messaging service, transactions. So all these are by default is there inside Spring framework. Again, if you check the web module, inside you have servlet, portlet, web. So this is again already here AOP for simplifying the programming, aspect oriented programming, instrumentation. Then beans, core, conducts, expression language, and test module, maybe JUnit. So by using Spring framework, this is an all-rounder framework. You don't need to manually integrate multiple technologies for developing Java applications. Instead, you just need to use the Spring framework. So this Spring framework will be providing all the features whatever you required for developing the applications. Just we need to use the Spring framework, and we can reduce a lot of boilerplate codes. So I'm I'm discussing the features of the Spring and Spring modules. So one of the Spring module is Spring Core Container. Spring Core module provides fundamental functionality Spring, including dependency injection and bin factory. So if you know Java programming, managing a Java object creation across your application is very difficult. Whenever you create an object like this, std is equal to, so if you are just creating a Java object like this, you have internally the application, our JVM is doing a lot of tasks. So if you know Java, in that if you are creating Java object, by default it will be calling parent class constructor, or loading all the parent classes and creating instance. So this step will be doing a lot of tasks, and it will be very difficult if you always create a object by your own using new keyword in your application. Your application will be very slow, requires a lot of memory. So to avoid all those things, Spring has built-in object creation and managing. So that feature is we are getting using Spring Container, Spring Core module. So one more difficult thing whenever you are using technologies, you have to manually inject the dependencies. So suppose if you are inside your application, you have to access database. So manually you need to inject the database dependencies. Suppose if you have some database class, you need to manually create the object and manually inject into your class. So that is a difficult thing, so that we can easily manage using Spring module. By default, Spring is supporting dependency management, then dependency injection, and this object creation management. And Spring another module is, just I am giving a brief view about all the modules. Spring AOP support aspect oriented programming, allowing separation of cross-cutting business logic. Using AOP, suppose if you are developing an application using Java technologies, you have to one of the main thing whenever you are developing an application, you have to log each and every step. So suppose if you are connecting to database, in future something happened and in production you need to find what happened, what was the issue. So for that you need to log the statements, so you need to save the errors whatever you are getting inside application somewhere. So all those will be, we need to write that. Those are tightly coupled. Maybe if you do like SOP, system.out.println, executing db code. So here like this you need to manually write inside each and every step. By using Spring AOP, you need to write this at once and you can use the same thing across your application. So that is one advantage which we are getting using AOP. Not only logging, lot of cross-cutting concerns like logging, then maybe transaction logic. Maybe if you are connecting to database, you are doing some update operation inside database, you need to start the transaction. So that is one more thing. So and again, if based on the logic you need to commit. So all those are we don't need to manually do it. Everything will be given by Spring AOP module. And Spring data access integration include module for JDBC ORM. So using this data access integration module, we can connect to database using JDBC, Spring JDBC and ORM. So and one more module is Spring Web, provide feature for building web application including Spring MVC framework. So using web module you can simply develop web applications. And Spring security module, using security module you can get a lot of built-in features for securing your applications. By default, if you use this module, you will be getting a lot of security things, so you don't need to manually take care of those. Everything is already coded by developers and they are giving us on the form of this module. So we just need to implement this module. And Spring's test, whenever you are developing an application, you need to write the code for maybe testing code, mocking code. So most widely used framework is JUnit, and also using JUnit, again we need one mocking framework along with JUnit, suppose Mockito. So all those are can be easily integrated with Spring Test module. Then comes Spring Boot. It's not exactly a module, but it simplifies the process of developing production ready Spring Boot based application. So when you do whenever you are using Spring application, you have to do a lot of manual configurations. Like you need to take care of all the dependency injection, maybe using XML or annotation. Not only that, multiple things, object creation, lot of configuration, you need to supply lot of details. So all those are, suppose I am telling you. So let's consider one example. You are working in an organization and the organization is already having some code. So suppose it's a financial institution, so you are doing some financial task, like maybe it's a bank application, and always you guys you need to use some things, some sort of same code always. So at that time, suppose in your bank application you have a loan feature, loan module. So like that you have a maybe loan, then maybe some other business things. So if you are using this always, again if suppose you developed this in one application and again you are in bank, tomorrow client is asking you to develop one more application. So what you will do, again you need to write the loan module inside that application. And suppose in future your application have a lot of in your company have a lot of application, and all the developers need to manually write this loan module in all of their application. So that is less efficient and repetitive. So again we need to do same thing again and again. So these things in the same way, so how you can avoid that problem? So if in your company you have a multiple applications and all your application need a same set of logic always for each application, so what you will do, instead of writing in every application, you will write this application module for one application and you will pack it as a jar and you will give that to some other applications. So those applications can easily use this by adding the dependency in their application. So they don't need to manually write the code always, they just need to call the methods. So implementation already available. So like that, Spring people noticed that whoever using Spring framework, they are everyone using same set of configuration. As I told you, if you are using plain Spring framework, you have to do lot of configuration. So inside Spring framework, multiple developers are, they noticed multiple developers are using same set of codes, always they are configuring same things. Maybe you developed one Spring application today, tomorrow you need to develop one more application, again you need to repeat the same configuration. Some of your friend again developing another application, he need to repeat the configuration. So all these are the problems. These are identified our Spring team, which is Enterprise 21. Currently it's with VMware, so pivotal team former. So they noticed that and they created Spring Boot. So all the boilerplate code, so same logic, same configuration which is required for each and every enterprise application, they packed it as a jar, they developed at one time and they well tested, then they packed as a jar and given as a parent project. So that feature is given as a Spring Boot. So whenever you are creating a new project, you are just taking that Spring people developed project and you are doing business logic on top of that. So you don't need to manually write the configuration logic each and every time. So it's a helps in rapid application development. So that feature is we are getting using Spring Boot. So it's not a module, rather it's a simplified Spring. We don't need to manually configure Spring framework anymore. So and the next module is Spring Cloud module. So using Spring Cloud module, we can develop distributed microservice applications. So it has a lot of features, like if you are in distributed application, maybe you need a gateway, also maybe you need some type of servers, load balancer, then configuration server, logging, distributor logging. Maybe if you are connecting to one application, so you need to log the what you are sending, what you are receiving, and in distributed application lot of other things you need to do manually. So all those are you can easily implement by just using Spring Cloud module. So that is one advantage with the Spring Cloud module. And Spring Data module, as I told you before, if you are not using Spring application, you need to write maybe 7-step code for connecting to database. Also if you are using some other technologies, you need to manually connect to write code for connecting to database. So and also if you want to, suppose if you want to retrieve a student record from the database, so if you want to retrieve student record from the database, you need to write the query, maybe logic manually using Spring JDBC or ORM. Again you need to, it's a complicated thing. If you are doing some operations, maybe same thing again and again, as I told you, same steps for connecting to database. So using Data JPA, you don't need to manually do it anymore. You just need to give your username and password inside Spring Boot application. So Spring Boot will take care of connecting to database. Maybe within one step you can query database and you can retrieve the result. It's like very easy, so anyone can easily learn Spring Data. So also Spring Batch for processing large scale data processing tasks. Maybe in enterprise application we need to process a lot of requests, a lot of huge data by applications, maybe yeah, data handling, all those we can easily done using implemented using Spring Batch module. This is not the end of the Spring module. Like this, we have multiple modules inside Spring applications. These are some example modules which I just taken to explain. So Spring modules, Spring by default is giving all these modules to simplify application development. So I am just explaining the advantages of Spring framework. So in 2002, Spring framework is developed by Rod Johnson, and the team name was Interface 21, and it provides abstraction on top of multiple technologies. So as I told you, it's providing abstraction on JDBC. No need to manually write code to connect to database. Again, ORM mapping. Again, we have to do something to connect to database. We need to manually map our database table with Java classes. Then we need to write the logic for connecting to, for retrieving queries and processing the result. So that is also boilerplate code. So to avoid that, we have a Spring framework. By default, Spring is giving all those features. So it's if you see, it's giving abstraction on top of more JDBC and Hibernate, using combining both and giving to us as a Spring. So it's an advantage for developers, and next all kind of development is possible. It's an all-rounder framework. You can develop any type of application using Spring, maybe desktop application, web application, mobile, not mobile application. Yeah, you can develop mobile application by using some Spring features. Again, desktop application, standalone application, web application, then distribute application as like our Flipkart and Amazon, Facebook. Then application development is non-invasive programming. So as I said, if you want to develop a servlet application, you need to implement servlet interface. So you don't need to manually implement the servlet interface. There is no dependency in implementing some interface for you just need to include the modules. Suppose if you take one example, inside a dependency session, we just need to give the dependencies. Maybe if you want to connect to database, you just need to give the database jars. Automatically Spring will take care of connecting. You don't need to manually write 7-step logic. So avoiding boilerplate code and non-invasive means you no need to manually implement the interfaces. Then built-in middleware services, connection pool, transaction services. So as I know, if you know JDBC and Hibernate or Java programming or SQL, if you do some update or some DML operation inside database, you need to do transaction. Transaction means if you inserted some records to database, you need to commit or roll back. Then only that will be permanent in the database. So that type of thing is already there. We need to implement in application also in using Java code. So by using Spring framework, it's providing built-in middleware services. You don't need to manually commit the logic and roll back. So Spring will take care of that for you. Then connection pooling service. So if multiple users are connecting to one database, one application at the same time, suppose, let me show you. Suppose this is a application. User 1, user 2, user 3. So for suppose if user 1 minute, Facebook, maybe bank application. So Let's consider the example of ICICI Bank application. Suppose user 1 logged into application and he wants to retrieve the check the balance of his account. So what will be happening in this case? So in this case, user will send request to the ICICI server. So server will process the request. So and it will create a connection object. Maybe connection, let's you consider the connection object as a box, maybe. Yeah, so using connection object, application will connect to database and retrieve the balance, and it will display it to the user 1. Again user 2 is creating checking the balance. Again application is creating new connection object, again giving the balance back to user 3. This is happening for each and every user. So it's a very complex task at the server side, which will slow down your application. So instead, if you use Spring Boot have by default connection pooling, which is Hikari CP, which is the one of the best connection pooling provider. So in this case, if user is sending request, if you are using connection pooling, you don't need to manually create connections. So 3 connection is already there inside pool. So if user is requesting to retrieve the balance from the ICICI Bank application will take one connection which is already inside a connection pool. Suppose it's like, yeah, so it will use one connection from the pool. Again it will connect to database and it will retrieve the record. Suppose this is the database. So using this connection one, user 1 will connect to database and retrieve the result, and the connection will not be destroyed. Again it will be kept inside pool. So if user 2 also want connection 2, connection 3, and maybe if there are multiple users, so every time they are not destroying the connection, instead it is using the connection from the pool. So no need to manually create and destroy the connection all the time. Instead connection is already created and kept inside this pool. So whoever wants to connect to database, directly application will take one connection from the connection pool and it will connect, then give it back to the connection pool. So this will optimize the speed of application, and we will get responses very quickly, rather creating connection and destroying every time. It will be time consuming for the application and resource consuming. So application will be slow in that case. So this feature is built by default provided by the Spring framework. So as I told you, the latest feature like vendor is Hikari CP, providing excellent connection pooling feature. So we can use that if you are using Spring. Lightweight application development compared to framework EJB. So EJB, like as I told you before, EJB is one of the old framework, not framework, technology for developing the framework for developing Java applications. So using EJB, if you want to run EJB applications, you need a heavyweight servers. So you need a high high RAM, high storage, each and everything. So power consumption, everything will be huge. So at that time there is no cloud and environment. Maybe inside a company they will be using server environment. So that's why I said power consumption. So all those resources will be overutilized by EJB. So compared to EJB, Spring is a lightweight application. Using Spring application can be easily run with less RAM compared to EJB. So easy to learn and use. Learning EJB was a little bit complex. So compared to Spring, EJB was complex, and not compared to Spring. Already EJB was very complex, but Spring is very easy. It is giving a lot of features by default. We just need to take care of something, some configuration, but using Spring Boot we can avoid that also. One of the Now what next? So one of the main feature of Spring is dependency injection. So using dependency injection, Spring can be we need to manually configure the dependencies using auto wiring or using XML. So there are three types of auto wiring. One is by name, by type, by constructor. So yeah, by name means, suppose so if this service want to talk to database, if you are using by name auto wiring, so you will be having other class. So instead my service, if you want to connect to DB and retrieve student details, if you want to get student details inside my service, you need to inject the student DAO object. So then only you can call maybe inside one method. So this class code will be here. So if you see this, instead using student DAO class, DAO means data access object. So using this DAO class, we are connecting to database and retrieving the student details, student count, so from the database, so whatever we have saved. So if you want to use this method inside my service, you need to inject, this is the dependency and this is the target, sorry, this is the dependent object for this is the dependency injection. So inside my service, which is a target class, if you want to connect to database, you need this dependent database object. So that's why we are injecting this. So if you don't have Spring framework, you need to manually write this code. So if you are not using Spring framework, if you want to connect to database inside my service class, you need to manually inject. This is constructor. Inside constructor we are manually injecting. So inside main method, suppose this is the main method. when you are creating object of this my service, you need to manually supply the dependency. So first I am creating object of student DAO. So first I created object of this class. Now this class I am injecting to my service. So this class will be injected while object creation of the my service. So this is the dependent class and this is the target class. Inside target class, this dependent class will be injected and this will be used for to connect to database. So this method will be executed. So this is the dependency of this target class. So like this, if you are develop an enterprise application, you will be having n number of dependencies in multiple places. Maybe you will use the same DAO in multiple classes. So all the time you need to write this manually like this. So this is the one more hectic thing we need to do. So to avoid that, Spring has given one feature. If you just give one annotation, auto-void, automatically this code will be given. You don't need to manually inject like this. So that is the advantage you are getting. So that is called auto-wiring, assigning the dependent class object to target class. This is the target class and this is the dependent class. Automatically Spring will give during runtime based on some specifications. So that we will look into this later. So that is the auto wiring, and we have three types of auto wiring: by name, by time, bunch constructor. I'm not going too deep to these injections, these auto wiring things. So compared to Spring, what is the advantage we are getting in Spring Boot? Spring framework for JE technologies. As I told you before, Spring provide abstraction on top of multiple JE technologies, provide dependency injection and lookup. So in Spring also we have to configure the same thing, not through code but using some XML. So this dependency target class and dependent class injection is required inside Spring also, but through XML. So that is also a boilerplate code always. So support XML driven configuration for IOC container. Okay, IOC container means inversion of control. So in the previous case, I created object manually, by programmer created manually and injected. So that thing is done by programmer. So instead of that, control is inverted to Spring. So Spring will take care of that, and that container is called IOC container. That container will take care of that and it will inject. So I don't need to manually inject that anymore. So that is called IOC container, and this container is useful for dependency injection. So requires a programmer to create IOC container explicitly. We need to create the object, variant configuration, XML, multiple type of configuration, and Desin provide embedded server. So in Spring Boot we have embedded server, but that is not there inside Spring. We need to manually configure if needed. And in embedded database, again we have H2 database which is embedded with Spring Boot, that is not there with Spring. It's a runtime database. We can connect while running the application, but later on it will be disappeared, all the data saved into database. So later due to manual configuration. Yeah, so as I told you, we have to do a lot of manual configuration. So we will only configure whatever required. Limited support for microservice architecture using Spring framework. So if you are using Spring Boot is by default configuring a lot of things, which is sometimes if the application is very small, those configurations will not be required. So that's why Spring Boot is heavyweight compared to Spring. So Spring is lightweight. Spring Boot simplifies the Spring application development with auto configuration. As I told you, you just need, wherever you need this DAO object, you just need to give auto wired everywhere. So Spring will take care of all those dependency object creation management. So suppose if you want inside my student service, you need some other object, this same object again you will write the 2 lines. So configuration made easy using Spring Boot. Main feature is like auto configuration, which common things automatically. So every Spring application, maybe every enterprise application need to connect to database at one time in multiple ways. So every time Spring Boot will be automatically connecting to database. We just need to give username and password. So if you are using Spring framework, you need to manually write the connect by you need to manually write the configuration for connecting to database. That is not required in case of Spring Boot. Doesn't support XML driven configuration for IOC container. Yeah, so instead of XML we need to use auto annotation, automatically create IOC container. One more advantage, primarily use auto configuration with YAML. Yeah, so if you know Spring Boot, inside Spring, suppose I am just taking one application. Inside Spring we have to supply, inside resources section we have application.properties. So auto configuration YAML file. Yeah, inside properties file, suppose I am just connecting to ActiveMQ. In that case I am just giving MQ means messaging queue to connect to multiple application, just giving username and password. Spring will take care of connecting everything for me. So that is an advantage with Spring framework. So provide embedded server Tomcat. So if you just include the web dependency, Spring web module in your Spring Boot application, automatically we will get embedded server, can be Tomcat or Jetty. So and you have embedded database if you include the dependency heavier due to extensive auto configuration, offer extensive support for. So as I told you, Spring Boot is a Spring application only, but it have a parent project. So as I told you before in the previous example, if you want a loan functionality in each and every application, if you are bank company, so always you need to write repeatedly. Instead you make it as a jar file and supply to all the developers or put into your company repository, so everyone can use the same loan. No need to write the code again. So like this, Spring also requires some type of things repeatedly for each and every application. So all those things are packed by Spring developers, Spring inventors, and they made it publicly available. So whoever wants to use Spring Boot, by default we are getting all those features. Using that feature we have all these advantages. So include embedded database, maybe Tomcat server we are getting always. So they already prepared the configuration logic, and Spring Boot offers extensive support from microservice architecture. So microservice architecture is one of the architecture. So instead of developing one application as a one big monolith application, you will be breaking your application into small application, and it will be connected to form a big application. So that will be an advantage of microservice architecture. So maintenance, everything will be easy and very highly scalable, and support large load. So all those have the features of microservice. So Spring Boot is mainly used for microservice only. So if you are developing microservices using Spring Boot, it's very easy. You within few steps you can get the all the common things, maybe the application, but you need to write the business logic, that's it. So and one more thing, I am explaining what is at a Spring Boot application in Spring Boot. So I am just taking an example of Spring Boot application. I am just opening my Spring application. This is a Spring Rust tutorial, so program application. So inside this I have you see, I have a wish controller having request mapping, and if you just give this at control annotation, your class will get the facility for handling the HTTP request. In previous case of servlet, you need to implement servlet interface, all the 5 methods you need to manually write the code, but in Spring application you just need to give the at control annotation. So, and if you give a response body annotation, instead of getting the result in your web page, it will be given in the HTTP body, so response body. So that's what, so these two applications we can combine to a one annotation, which is REST controller. So using REST controller annotation, you don't need to manually write the response body configuration. So basically it will be automatically given as a REST response. If you know the REST programming, in REST programming you will give the result as a JSON file or XML. So automatically Spring will take care of converting the suppose in this case, if the time is less than 12 hour, good morning, less than 16, good afternoon, good evening, good night. So based on this result will be returned back to the caller, maybe in JSON or XML file. So you don't need to manually convert all those using object converter or Jackson API. So Spring will take care of that for you if you just give a REST control annotation. So that is an advantage. So now I am explaining what is the use of at Spring Boot application. So this application is primarily consist of 3 annotations. So one is enable auto configuration, which automatically configure the app based on detected dependencies, and components can specify where look for components, and Spring Boot configuration configure the application context. Okay, so if you see inside Spring Boot application, if you go inside, you will see all this: enable Spring Boot auto configuration and component scan, all these 3 annotations. So by default Spring will look into, in this case in.ineuron, it will look into all the submodules of this package. So for at configuration annotated classes, so example, I'm just showing one code for connecting to database. If you take the example, is in this case Spring Boot application will automatically search for this annotation, which is enable auto configuration annotation. So that is not required because by default it is there. So if you run Spring Boot application, automatically it will be detecting all the dependencies from the pom.xml. Based on this, it will create the configuration, and also based on the application.properties file. So for that we have some application like conditional annotations, or like if you given dependency of database inside pom.xml dependency list, so it will be connecting to database automatically. So configuration will be done automatically. So in this case, sometimes we need to do manual configuration. Some type, suppose JMS don't have a connection, automatic configuration with the Spring Boot, so we need to manually configure using at component scan. So if you see this annotation, this Spring Boot annotation, this is consist of component scan annotation also. So automatically it will scan for at configuration annotated classes. So while starting the application, Spring automatically configure all the required dependencies of the configuration, then it will look for at configuration annotated classes, in this case JMS configuration for connecting messaging queues. So using at bean annotation, this class object will be created and it will be given to the Spring container for managing. Also message converter object will be created and given back to the Spring for managing. So in the same way we have a Spring Boot configuration. So suppose you don't need to manually write this inside this, because this annotation, Spring annotation already have at configuration. So in that case, if you copy and if you copy this code and under this class I am just giving. So this will also work. So because Spring Boot application already have a configuration annotation inside, so we don't need to manually do it. Components can enable auto configuration. Spring Boot configuration have a configuration, so you don't need to manually do this also, but for better readability I did this. So that is the one advantage with the Spring Boot application. This annotation will take care of all the activities if you are running the application in the embedded Tomcat server. So by default Spring have that embedded Tomcat server available. So yeah, so next thing is Spring JDBC, Spring ORM, already discussed, Spring Data JPA. So to these things we will look into later day, in a different day. So as of today I am just concluding this, so I am stopping for today. So bye, take care.